My name is Kelsey. This year, I'll be turning 45. Our only son began living independently when he went off to college. And suddenly the house that my husband and I once shared with him feels much more spacious. This custom-built home was designed after many discussions with my husband. We built a spacious 5-bedroom house with a vaulted ceiling that spans 3 stories, ensuring there's plenty of room for the kids to run around without any issues. Our large balcony is where I proudly grow my herbs, from lavender to chamomile, and edible ones like basil, mint, and rosemary. I grow a variety of herbs. A mojito made with freshly picked mint is the best, and my homemade basil sauce is my son's favorite. I always pack it in jars and sneak it into the care packages I send him. My husband's study, a space he's particular about, has ample workspace and large shelves that reach the ceiling, displaying his collection of books and video games. My husband, who enjoys his collection of books and games to his heart's content, often spends his days off in there, hardly coming out except for meals and bathroom breaks. As for me, I enjoy my beloved gardening and watching the dramas and movies I've recorded during the week in the living room, each of us fully enjoying our weekends. While enjoying a peaceful weekend like this, I often think to myself, is this the relaxed second phase of life after raising children? Both my husband and I work late on weekdays. We stretched our budget to build this house, and I've been covering the mortgage payments with my income. Once our son turned 1, we placed him in daycare and I worked reduced hours. When he became more independent, I started working full-time as a regular employee. Now that child-rearing has settled down, my current passions are my job and my home garden. Such were the peaceful days until an unexpected event turned everything upside down. I sold this house to my older brother. At first, I couldn't understand what my husband was saying. "What do you mean?" When I asked, confused, my husband explained with a slightly irritated look. "You know my brother has always lived in an apartment, right? It's pitiful with 3 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment. Our son has moved out. So I thought it was a good time to pass this house on to my brother." My husband decided something so important without consulting me. As I puzzled over this, he glared at me with a deep frown. "Don't you know what it means to help people? It's normal to lend a hand when family is in trouble. How heartless can you be?" While I respect the desire to help a struggling family member, the fact that he made this decision without consulting me, his cohabitant wife, is simply unacceptable. Where will we live? It's unfair to be informed about it after it's been decided. Anger was bubbling up inside me, but I managed to lock it away deep in my heart and spoke to my husband rationally. However, in the end, I was silenced with these words. "Enough. I'm the breadwinner of this family. Just keep quiet and follow my lead." Although my husband has always been a bit authoritarian since we got married, this was the first time he had imposed his opinion on me to this extent. Moreover, my brother-in-law and his wife have a tendency to rely on us for various things. 3 years ago, the brother-in-law and his wife, who frequently visited our home, would say, "You only have 1 child who's already big, so you can take care of our kids a bit," and then leave their 3 elementary school children with us to go out. It was just me and my son taking care of the 3 kids. They would make excuses to leave their children at our house and enjoy themselves. "Our house is big, so feel free to ask for help." While my husband would be accommodating to his brother, he never actually took care of the kids himself and would just shut himself in his study. Before I knew it, he had even installed a lock on the inside to keep them from coming in. And the nephews we were looking after had no sense of restraint. "I'm tired of your cooking. I want to eat out. I want a hamburger. Mom and Dad said that you are very kind and will grant any request we have." With parents like that, it's no wonder the kids turned out this way. No matter how many times I talked to my husband, he never listened to my opinions. Even our son, who was in high school at the time, was fed up with the weekends. We discussed it and decided to avoid taking care of our nephews by having our son work part-time and me taking on extra work. Even my husband, who was the only one free, seemed to dislike taking care of them alone and managed to talk his way out of it with them, despite having become distant from my brother-in-law and his wife since then. I was dizzy with shock when I suddenly found out about the house being handed over. The next day, my brother-in-law and his wife came to our house under the guise of an inspection. The nephews, now in middle school, were still as brash as ever. They were making a racket in what they thought would be their new rooms. My brother-in-law, looking pleased, said, "You're moving? Well, this house must be too big for just the two of you now. Don't worry. We'll take good care of it." I had no idea about moving until yesterday, but my brother-in-law showed no consideration. And my sister-in-law, acting as if she owned the place, stood in the kitchen. "Make sure you hire a proper cleaning service before you leave. It'll be a hassle for us if you skimp on that." How brazen can you get? I was astounded by my sister-in-law's blatant desire for us to leave quickly. Even when I hinted that the mortgage wasn't fully paid off yet, my brother-in-law just smiled confidently and said, "Don't worry. Our eldest will be in high school next year and my wife plans to work part-time. We'll manage that much. Leave it to me. I'll work hard." Watching this exchange between them, I wondered if they were misunderstanding something. I had been the one paying the mortgage since we built this house. The monthly payment is $1,800. Can my brother-in-law and his wife really afford such payments? As a pharmacist, I have a decent income, but it's still a significant amount. By contrast, I heard from my husband that my brother-in-law's take-home pay is about $2,000. It's impossible to live on the remaining $200. My brother-in-law and his wife seem to think that I work as a pharmacy clerk with a low salary and that the mortgage payments are not substantial. Pharmacy administrator, was it? That title does sound pretty cool, doesn't it? I'm currently studying for a medical administration certification through a correspondence course. Once I get it, I'll re-enter the workforce. My brother-in-law and his wife are carelessly optimistic. My husband is a very proud man, and I've always sensed that he feels somewhat inferior because I earn significantly more than he does. To avoid letting others realize the salary gap, it seems my husband has been describing my job as something like a pharmacy clerk. Well, that's beside the point, but my brother-in-law and his wife must think they can manage the repayments if they both work. As I was thinking along those lines, my brother-in-law suddenly asked me, "By the way, how much is the mortgage per month?" My husband's face, which had been smiling until then, froze. It seems he wasn't fully aware of the monthly repayment amount either. "It's $1,800. I said it without any hesitation. My husband, my brother-in-law and his wife were stunned. $1,800? You're kidding, right? That was the first thing my sister-in-law managed to say. It's no joke. We bought it without a down payment, so we're paying $1,800 a month, including the land." My sister-in-law, turning pale, raised her voice. "We can't afford that." Yes, I think so too. In my heart, I fervently wished that this matter would simply return to square one. My brother-in-law, shocked by the amount, was confronting my husband. "Are you seriously expecting us to pay this amount every month?" My husband hurriedly whispered to me, "Hey, haven't we been making extra payments? Is there still that much debt left? I've only been paying an extra month's installment with our bonuses. It's a 35-year loan, so even after calculating, we still have 15 years left." As I watched my brother-in-law and his wife's stunned faces, I prayed silently for them to back down quietly. But then my husband said something unbelievable. "All right. We'll continue to pay off the mortgage." Now it was my turn to be shocked. My brother-in-law and his wife, thrilled by the unexpected turn of events, praised my husband for his generosity, exclaiming, "What a big heart you have." Puffed up with pride, my husband was met with a loud objection from me. "What are you thinking? Why do we have to go this far?" Then my husband silenced me with his usual line. "It's only right to help family in need. Why are you so heartless?" I was so appalled I was lost for words. I had lost all patience with my husband's shallowness, trying to look good at all costs. Encouraged by my husband's proposal, my brother-in-law and his wife resumed their inspection of our home. "We want to move out at the beginning of next month, so please take care of the paperwork, moving arrangements, and everything else by then." My husband dumped everything on me. My anger meter was off the charts. That night, I called my son, who was living on his own. After explaining our situation and expressing my inability to stay silent any longer, my son laughed intriguingly on the other end. "It's about time you decided to fight back. You've been putting up with it for so long, give them a taste of their own medicine. Even if it ends in divorce, Mom, you have the strength to live on your own. Encouraged by my son's supportive words, I resolved to show my husband, his overbearing brother, and sister-in-law that I can stand up for myself. As soon as it was decided that my brother-in-law's family would take over our home, I consulted with the bank where we had the mortgage. In fact, I had been researching things like transferring the mortgage on my own since this issue came up. What I found was that, in principle, transferring a mortgage is not allowed. Typically, changes are made between spouses or between parents and children. This time, it involved a slightly more complicated scenario of changing ownership within the extended family. Moreover, I'm the one on the mortgage. While it's possible to change the name on the mortgage by hiding the relationship, if the financial institution finds out, it could be considered a serious breach of contract, and in the worst case, they could demand full repayment of the loan. Unaware of the high risks involved in changing the mortgage's name, my brother-in-law, his wife, and my husband had carelessly promised to hand over our home. I decided not to do anything until the handover date, focusing solely on my work and household chores. This, of course, infuriated my husband. Hey! Start arranging the movers already. If you keep dawdling, next month we'll be here before we know it. I'm busy with work. You should handle it. Plus, if we're moving out, we need to arrange for our new place to live. What are you going to do about that? You should take care of that. That's what I'm saying, I'm busy. Ignoring my silent husband, I went off to work. As these days went by, my husband must have contracted a moving company himself because large amounts of cardboard boxes started arriving at our home. Look, I've taken care of the moving arrangements. The contract for the new apartment is almost finalized, so stop sulking and start packing. But no matter what he said, I refused to start preparing. Day after day, this exchange repeated, and each time, my husband would loudly blame me. Enough already. Stop being so selfish. If you keep acting like this, I have my own plans. I'll divorce you, you hear me? I continued to ignore him and kept watching TV. The next day, my husband truly said that he wants to divorce. Do you see how serious I am now? I'll forgive you this time, but hurry up and pack. What does he mean by forgiving me this time? I was so dumbfounded I couldn't speak. Calmly, I agreed on divorce. Seeing my action, my husband began to panic, just as I had anticipated. What? You can't be serious, can't you take a joke? I had seen through his bluff. I no longer wished to be with someone who jokes about divorce. With that, I headed to the bedroom. Faced with my resolute attitude, my husband became completely submissive. I'm sorry, I don't want a divorce. I want to be with you forever. His tears and apology took me by surprise. All right, I understand. But we're not moving out of this house, and we're not changing the ownership. Let's continue to live here together. Although my husband understood my feelings, he was disheartened, saying, "That's impossible. We've promised my brother and his wife, there's nothing we can do now." Don't worry. I gave my husband's drooped shoulders a reassuring pat. On the day we were supposed to hand over the house, my brother-in-law and his wife arrived, loading their belongings into a borrowed pickup truck. It was a weekday, so their kids were at school. Finally, our own home. No need to repay the mortgage, this is perfect. They were as carefree as ever. As they happily entered the house, I stood firm in front of them. I'm sorry, but unless you agree to certain conditions, we cannot hand over our home to you. In my hand were the mortgage documents. As stated here, changing the mortgage's name is basically impossible. If you still want to live here, you'll need to pay off the remaining mortgage in full. My firm stance intimidated my brother-in-law, but his wife was unyielding. It's ridiculous for you to butt in. Just leave already. She was vehement. I showed them the mortgage documents again. It's only natural for me to be involved. I'm the owner of this house. Pointing out my name on the documents, she was visibly shocked. My husband has no rights here. As the owner, I refuse to hand over this house. Please leave immediately. I threatened to call the police if they continued to cause a scene. Just because you earn a bit more, don't get cocky. Can't you share some of that with your family who needs it? You're so cold-hearted. There was no reasoning with her. Being called cold-hearted is fine by me. Instead of always relying on us, please try to manage on your own for once. Set a good example for your children. With that, I went inside the house and locked the door firmly behind me. For a while, my brother-in-law and his wife continued to make a fuss outside. But they eventually left under the disapproving gazes of our neighbors. Shortly after, my husband received a call from my brother-in-law. We've already vacated our apartment. Please let us stay with you temporarily until we find a new place, he begged. My husband quietly responded with no. Unable to contain my amusement, I burst into laughter. It was clear that if we let my brother-in-law's family in, they would never leave. And my husband, intimidated by my firm stance and the divorce oath, had no choice but to stand his ground. My brother-in-law continued to call almost every day. There were times when his wife would call, crying. Yet, my husband steadfastly refused. Isn't it a bit pitiful? They said they don't have the money to rent a new place, and I feel sorry for the nephews. My husband muttered, glancing at me from time to time. It seems he wanted me to show some compassion. Seizing the opportunity, I suggested, didn't you have an apartment lined up for us to move into? Why not let them live there? That's an idea. Smirking, my husband slapped his knee and called my brother-in-law. Later, I heard that my brother-in-law and his family of 5 moved into that apartment. I would like to say all's well that ends well, but a further tragedy awaited my husband. My brother's family isn't paying the rent for the apartment. They said they'd transfer the rent to me, but I've been covering it for months now. Just as expected. There was no way that shameless couple would pay the rent. Since the apartment was rented by my husband, it was clear they would take advantage of him. I had foreseen this outcome when I suggested subletting the apartment to my brother-in-law and his wife. What a naive and showy gesture. I sarcastically remarked with a snort. You have to help out since the family is in trouble, right? You're not heartless like me, are you? My husband had no comeback. Struggling to pay the rent, my brother-in-law's family now lives crammed into a tiny one-bedroom apartment. It's unfortunate for the growing boys, but this might be the perfect punishment for their unbridled behavior. The anticipation of when their stress might explode is almost unbearable. But I have no sympathy for them, nor do I intend to help. They called me heartless. It seems my brother-in-law and his wife's hyena-like behavior continues, and my husband has accumulated a significant amount of debt for their sake. I'm truly glad we keep our finances separate. As I watch the pitiful end of those unrepentant, I'll be harvesting healthy basil for my son, who's coming home next month.